So welcome. I'm Rainer, founder of the Mindful Leader and also co-founder of the New You. I have a special guest here today, Wade Lightheart. Interesting to know, Wade is a three-time all-natural national bodybuilding champion, advisor to the American Anti-Cancer Institute, director of education at BioOptimizer Nutrition, and a lot of other things. When you look at this website, I will share the links later. It's a very interesting background and experience, and I'm glad, Wade, that you took some time out of your busy schedule today so we can chat a little bit about some of the topics of interest.
Yeah, thanks for great to be here. I'm really fascinated right now with the fusion between optimal health performance as well, particularly in digital executives, because as a co-founder of Bioptimizers, we have a fusion of those two issues, and I think it's something that leaders need to be aware of and to address as we move forward into the new frontier of society.
Yeah, very well. And this is exactly one of the topics is that myself, I spent many years in high tech, in data science topics, in research, and I've actually built up a research lab around deep learning and AI at Zalando here in Berlin, Germany. And for me, but then the interesting part always was with all those advances in technology, how can those actually be leveraged on a broader scale to pretty much everyone on the planet? But then when I look at those people who are making it happen, these are usually the tech leaders, or in general, of course, a broader set of leadership, not just tech leadership. My focus usually is more around tech leadership, and it is at the end these people who help to build these complex systems, who help to build algorithms that can deal with this. And of course, I've seen also a lot of developments and explosion of algorithms and focus more on biotech in the past years. Definitely here in Europe, but also in China, but also in the Silicon Valley as well. And it is probably this intersection, bringing technology, bringing algorithms together with better forms of mind management, better forms of helping people how to eat well, and then how to become more and more proactive to learn more about their own body and their own way of optimizing themselves. So, I mean, that's a little bit of the background also on my side, why I got very interested in this topic.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. Ironically, when I started in university, I originally started out in computer science, but was recognized very quickly that I was going to be a disastrous programmer and transferred into exercise physiology. But now, 25, or well, actually, no, it's now 30 years later, it's come full circle. And my company, which is a health-based company, uses a tremendous amount of digital technology in order to optimize the health and well-being as well as the functionality and performance of people in the tech industry. So it's funny how life comes around in circles.
Maybe you can share a little bit what exactly you guys are doing and how you're helping some of those leaders.
Yeah, so my business partner and I, and my business partner has a deep background in tech. He's built 13, I believe now, online digital-based companies. He's a very successful marketer in that way. And we actually have our computer science team has a number of Ph.D.s in uh, technology-based systems, AI, these type of things, and you need that today as a company that's marketing online. This is the future. This is where humanity's going. Um, and so, one of the things that we've noticed is that the idea, if we go back in time when I was in university, the idea was, hey, machines are going to completely make our lives better, more efficient, more effective, to do more things. And that is true to a certain extent. But if you track the historical aspects of people in the tech industry, oftentimes when they hit the zenith of their success, they run into major health challenges, relationship challenges, cognitive overload, because we're learning as a species of how do we interact with, the carbon extension or the silicon extension of our carbon-based brains. And the idea is to make machines make us better humans, not humans enslaved to the machines. And the cognitive load for people in the digital space is extreme. And many of the most gifted and brightest people, I think what happens, their body becomes just an extension of the machine. In other words, it's just something that carries their brain around in, and they're so wrapped up in the complexity of their business that 10, 20, 30 years goes by, and suddenly the physical machine's breaking down, and they're like, hey, what happened here? And our message, particularly with some of our latest developments in advancing optimal performance for people in the tech industry, high pressure executives, people who are deeply down in the creation of essentially the new society that is emerging here on planet Earth, is to remind them that all the tech in the world will do them no good if you've forgotten a few key essentials in order to make the human organism run properly. So we think that there's an opportunity to help fuse these, and we're very passionate about doing that for people, whether that's cognitive enhancement through nootropic developments, whether that is mindfulness practices, or using technology to monitor basic health functions, and then to do the suggestions lifestyle wise that will help them optimize the physical body so that they can do their work in the non-physical field.
Mhm. No, very good. And this is indeed also my observation that I see tech leaders, tech executives, they're building these complex systems and algorithms and change the world, and they're very successful with it. But when it comes looking at actually at their own body and actually looking at this as a complex or very complex, probably the most complex system that exists here on the planet, they're not paying too much, unfortunately, too much attention to it, to their own system, as you were saying. And so then what's happening, not immediately, but usually in 10 years, 15 years, that's what I usually observe in terms of time. It takes 10, 20 years, as you're not paying attention to your own body, not optimizing, so to speak, your own system. Things are happening then at that point, can happen very fast, and performance is declining. You become less and less resilient, and there's all kind of other symptoms that you may experience, particularly stress, as you know, is one of the worst enemies of your body. Um, and so the problem is that they're looking at this. Also, they're very good at setting goals for the next quarter, setting OKRs for the year on how to make the company successful. Unfortunately, many of them don't set their own goals or OKRs, so to speak, on how to optimize and pay more attention or prioritize their own bodies, right? And
Yeah, if you think of three great examples, I think in the modern era of this. First and foremost, we have Steve Jobs, who completely transformed what was possible by bridging the gap between high tech and the regular uneducated tech person. In other words, we moved technology away from big computing, big firms, and into the power of the individual, which set in motion a rapid expansion of people interested because of the interactivity. But he lost his life very early, and the world lost his genius probably for another, good 20 to 30 years, where he could have been continuing to innovate and direct the world. Then we have, I think, one of the best known biohackers, the father of biohacking, what a lot of people say, is Dave Asprey, who, as a tech executive, found himself in dire straits and began to apply technology to transform his health in order that he could, continue to live, because his curve was very damaging. And then between those people, I think you have someone like Tim Ferriss, who was very involved in the early startup culture in technology, the explosion in Silicon Valley and San Francisco and all that sort of stuff, but really kind of advanced biohacking and recognized that some of the challenges and anxiety and things that he is facing, which he's come out publicly about in that field, he needed to bridge that gap. So we have kind of three models right there, and all of them are saying the same thing. that your performance in the digital world will ultimately be compromised unless you address these issues. And the sooner that you address them, the better that they are. And now, in order to address them, you first need to bring awareness. What are
Yep.
the common problems? What are the common symptoms? And how do you prevent them or pull back from them if they're already emerging in your life?
Mhm. So that's a good point regarding the awareness. Maybe to ask you about this, right? I mean, there was probably some reflection point in your life when you were also becoming more and more aware of your body, of your system, right? The system of the body, how to optimize it. But what got you more and more into it? What was this point where somehow you said, "Oh, this is now something I actually have to prioritize. I have to make it more important. I have to actually spend time doing something," right? What what was this time basically?
Well, I have the unique position, I think, away from most of the tech folks, as I would commonly refer the tech folks, people that are insanely smart in this tech world, which I would say I'm not. I was always passionate about sports, athletics, and performance. And my sister was diagnosed with cancer at an early age and died at the age of 22 when I was a teenager. And this was just in my first year of computer science. And I switched out, as I mentioned earlier, into exercise physiology because I wanted to know the care and the function of the body and how to perform. And so I went through the health industry until it resulted in, me representing my country of Canada at the Mr. Universe contest. And shortly after that contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks and went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow. And that led me to, you can imagine I had the best coach in the world. I've got 16 years of discipline. I'm recognized as the ideal of physical aesthetics in the industry. And I'm an absolute physical wreck. And I'm like, how is this possible? Which is very similar to a crisis that many people in the tech industry face, at the zenith of their career, their relationships or their health or their mental well-being starts to break down. Well, the same thing happened to me. And I met a doctor who was well renowned for rebuilding people from the inside out, dealing with digestive health, enzymes, probiotics, special specifications in addressing dietary components, leaky gut. And this was like 20 years ago when nobody was talking about it. It was very radical. I embarked on a complete mentorship with him, rebuilt my physicality, and was able to hit high performance levels. Concordantly, Matt, my business partner, who was a successful online marketer in the early days of, when Google was just getting going and these type of things, he said that, hey, why don't we start producing courses online? And I didn't believe that anybody was making money. He didn't believe that I didn't own a computer because I had spent a bunch of time uh, around after the Mr. or during the Mr. Universe, where I spent some time in some ashrams in India and got into mindfulness and meditation practice and things like that. So we built that program, and it took me about 4 years. We coached over 15,000 people globally, where I could start to see patterns emerging within the research. And then from that, we developed a set of principles. I call it the awesome formula, which I give this away on our website so people can have a systematic way of addressing first principles of health and vitality. We don't even get to supplements until like 5 levels down. There's a lot of things that you can do before that. And then we started doing that. And then ironically, as the success of our company began to grow in the digital world and expansion, and I took on 2 other projects. So I became a serial entrepreneur, like half the other people in tech. You get so excited about the new developments and you want to get on. And I ended up working. I was working between 12 and 15 hours every day for 2 years. Didn't take a day off, and hit the wall, completely burned out. And first had to rebuild my nervous system. I was using neurofeedback to realize that my brain had lost its ability to derive all of the neurochemicals that allowed for happiness and high performance. We hooked myself up, and I had a brain of a 70-year-old. And I was like, wow, how did this happen? I'm supposed to be a health and performance guy. And now I've got this wildly successful company. I've overextended myself. And now I've got myself into a crisis. The good news was is I had the resources and capabilities. I knew what I needed to do, and I began to apply it. I dropped off one of the businesses that I was doing. I had to make some lifestyle changes, and then I implemented a variety of things, nervous system optimization, and then that led to neurochemical optimization. And we ended up creating a sub brand to the company, which is Nutopia, which deals primarily with cognitive performance, and we're continuing to expand our offerings in both that area as well as digestive health, because what a lot of people don't understand is that we make the false assumption that everything that goes into our mouth gets converted into the energy units and building blocks of our body. But we live in a symbiotic relationship with these little bacterias, and sometimes called probiotics, sometimes referred to as the microbiome. But basically, the symbiotic relationship means that if we do not have sufficient amounts of these workers, and I would also add enzymes to that equation. Without those two aspects, enzymes and probiotics, which are the only things that actually do work in your body, then our capabilities are extremely limited in the physical level and will continue to degenerate as we age. And that means a couple of things. One, your quality of life, your ability to perform well, your health and your happiness are going to suffer, and they're going to decline, and sometimes rather rapidly with the development of a disease. The second thing is, if you can change that component, you can now meet the almost unlimited demands of cognitive extension that silicon-based systems provide. So the beauty of deep learning, AI, machine work, computational capabilities, algorithmic functions for efficiency and effectiveness and conversion of data is so that we can make better decisions from our carbon brain. The problem is, if because of the exponential expansive nature and our lack of experience in these digital systems, we as humans have not learned how not to become the machine, but to use the machine to become better humans. And so right now, the opportunity, which is often written with the symbol of crisis in Kaishu script in Asia, they show both things, is that tech leaders today, or certainly the more successful ones and the ones making the best impact, they're starting to recognize, wait a minute, our valuations are important, the expansion, our market share, the development of new technology that puts us in a highly leveraged position that no one else can compete with us, and that major press to get there that happens if you're in startups and these type of things, it needs to be offset with being able to ensure that both the executives and the people working under them are fully functional in making good decisions as healthy uh, carbon-based organisms extended into the digital world. And so this is a fascinating field which we're spending a lot of time, effort, and energy and research on. And it's a lot of fun, and the results speak for themselves. We're now able to assist with executives who were feeling the cognitive burnout from excessive neurotransmitter deficiency due to dietary components, and now are able to operate at peak levels and sustain them and make better decisions and become more efficient and effective executives.
No, this is really interesting stuff. And as I'm a tech leader myself, I spent the last 15, 20 years in tech in the Silicon Valley, and I observed exactly what you were describing, right? Is basically there is at some point you're not aware of what's happening there. You focus on your goals, objectives. There's all this fancy new tech coming in that keeps your mind completely busy. And at the end of the day, your neurotransmitters they require energy, and if you don't feed your body basically with the proper nutrients, there will not be sufficient energy to drive all those things, right? And so I would make this hypothesis that pretty much everyone in tech doesn't have to be a leader. It can be just engineer, designer, product manager, whatever. They're working. They have to work at the end at the very high capacity, at the very high performance, and so it's not a matter of basically if, but basically when the time comes in their career when this eventually this thing is catching up, right? If the if the body is not getting sufficient energy, is not taking care properly, so the system can't function optimally, it will continuously spiral down, and at some point you'll notice the symptoms, right? And so the question then is, you mentioned about already awareness, that is a key point. Getting in this, becoming more aware. You mentioned mindfulness as well for yourself when you started exploring this. Do you think this is something that for those tech leaders, there is a certain stage when it just comes to them that they need to become more aware, or they suddenly become more aware to get into this or get started? So basically, getting them not doing the mistake of waiting 10 years and then all of a sudden everything is down the toilet, but actually now starting to get into this. What do you think?
I believe we're on the cusp of that awareness. It's an emerging field, largely because if you look historically, and let's just deal with some facts first and foremost, because the tech industry by nature requires extreme cognitive capabilities. It just does. I mean, this is it's a very highly specialized, a very rapidly expanding field, and has certain time pressures built into the model. It's unavoidable just because of the nature of technology. Now, if we look at psychological profiling of neurocognitive functioning, most people's cognitive capabilities start to decline at 25.
Mm,
Okay. In other words, there is rust building into the machine used to oxidative damage, lack of blood flow to the brain, and improper nutrition being delivered to the system in order to manufacture the neurotransmitters that are concordant with optimal brain functions. So let's get into brain function really quickly, because I think it's important for people in this industry to understand how the mechanism works, and so then they can make. Once I'm going to give them a very simple model that can be validated by psychological science, but is also related to their performance of function. So when you eat food, that food goes through a 5-stage digestive process. And in its 4th stage, at the point where it's actually the food is converted by these symbiotic relationship with bacteria, it's converted into energy units and building blocks. Many of the neurotransmitters that make your brain work and make you feel good are actually built by these organisms in your gut. The modern world has damaged these or eliminated these to such a wide variety of extent. We have people that are coming out in their teenage years with imbalances in their neurochemistry, which limits them excessively. Second, what's interesting is some of these limitations early on seem to indicate there may be benefits. I want to be clear. So you see a high amount of people with, say, Asperger's very successful in the tech industry because they're able to stay highly focused for long periods of times because they're only operating on a very narrow band of neurochemistry, and the whole array of the human's experience is locked away from them because they're not able to manufacture the neurotransmitters to experience these other things. And they keep extending the axon dendrite connections inside their brain related to certain cognitive functions. And so you see this emerging even more and more until disaster strikes, because you can only, it's like a 3-wheel car. Yes, it'll go down the road, but sooner or later you're going to hit a turn, and then the wheel's going to fall, and the car is going to flip, and you're going to crash and burn. And you might survive it, you might not, but there's going to be unnecessary damage to that machine. So when we look at this cognitive performance, there is a couple things. Number one, neuroplasticity. What does that mean? That means your capability to develop new axon dendrite connections related to skill. This ability is anchored by the dopamine loop. So human organisms have developed reward systems based on positive skill development. So, 2,000 years ago, the ability to throw a spear very well through repetition and practice made you more accurate, and that made you a more successful person in the world of tribal warfare. and though, or survival between, you know, predators, or whether that's involved in learning the skills around positive farming, horticulture, any of those things. So as you learn, there's a dopamine release inside the brainstem, which increases and strengthens the axon dendrite connections inside your brain. Very much like adding more computing power to your, more networks to your silicon brain. And so what we didn't understand is in engineering, you just go get some more chips and some more wires and you learn. And so we understand in engineering, you're always trying to get faster and faster computing, more and more power through the development of chip technology, and how you build out the functioning of those mathematical models that allows the computers to do certain things. Well, it's the same thing in your own brain. So what's interesting is silicon brains are actually replicating what we do in our own brains. But unlike what we're doing in where this is a pure engineering process, we have to engineer through nutrition and lifestyle in order that we can both, number one, build the axon dendrite connections. That's the learning, that's your focus, that's where you develop skills, but also being able to manufacture sufficient numbers of neurochemicals and deliver them to the brain through high levels of blood flow, so that now that you can continue to learn way past what is commonly seen as your cognitive limit or your cognitive capabilities. And the evidence is fascinating, because if you look at neurofeedback models, you know, some people like 40 Years of Zen at Dave Asprey's function, which I'm a big fan of and go quite regularly, you can, and a variety of other models, you're now able to see that people in 40, 50, 60 years old, 70, even 80 years old are now able, through nutrition and technology, to optimize brain function, regain cognitive speed, improve neurochemical balances, or your neurochemical kind of like a reservoir that allows you not only to build higher functioning cognitive performance, but to increase the quality of decisions and your overall health and happiness. And so now we're super excited about this field, because I think it's necessary in order to not lose so many great people inside the industry due to burnout, mental health issues, or serious health consequences that take them out of the game just when they start to kind of hit their stride of optimal capabilities.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. But now let's assume listeners to this, they said, "Oh yeah, this makes sense. I need to optimize my own system. I need to fuel it properly." As you also said earlier, it's kind of complex, and you went yourself. You went through a lot of different hoops, ups and downs, and on this journey learned a lot. You mentioned before some formula or some like
Yes.
5 steps
Yeah.
or anything. Could you maybe share on just on a high level 2 or 3 things that
Sure.
someone who now listened to this and says, "Oh man, this is great. I fully agree. This makes sense. What can I do to basically get started in a positive direction?"
Yeah, the great news is you can go to our bioptimizers.com app, and I've put this out into a 12-week course. And I outlined 7 key areas that people should put their time, energy, and resources in order of first principles. And a lot of people start with food. You know, everybody's wondering what diet and stuff. But I always look at this. Look, diet is one thing, but you can go, say, a month, 2 months without eating. It's uncomfortable, but you will survive. You can only go a few weeks at most without water. Therefore, water is more important than food. And then you go one step further. Well, is that the primary thing? No, air. You can only go a few minutes without air. Okay. So before we get to diet, deep breathing, proper hydration, and then there's one third thing. The third thing is all of the evidence in the psychological literature demonstrates that the one thing that will help you avoid cognitive decline more than anything else is regular exercise. Okay? So you can do all the computer games for cognitive performance. Nothing trumps getting blood flow to the brain, because these are the systems of delivery. It's like the electrical power
Mhm.
grid to your brain. If you do not get this, it doesn't work. So air, deep breathing, mindfulness practice, proper hydration. No, that doesn't mean, you know, these kind of nervous system stimulant drinks and things like that. We're talking real purified water. The third thing is regular daily exercise. And people go, what's the best exercise? The one that you're going to do regularly. Okay, so then that's going to vary between personal inclination, time constraints, and things like that. But if you build that in, those three things are what I call the primary principles of the awesome formula. The formula is air, water, exercise, sunlight, optimizers, mental beliefs and attitudes, and then finally education, testing, and coaching. That's the format. It's on the app, the Bioptimizers app. You can download it, and I take you through 5 to 15-minute videos. You can just follow along and how do you implement it. So I give it away for free. Those things are. The other thing is, I think, is important for digital people to understand is our interaction with blue light that's coming off computers and stuff really disrupts our circadian rhythms. This puts an extreme load and production of cortisol on the system, which depresses other hormones inside the body, particularly testosterone. Testosterone, if you look at why testosterone supplementation and TRT amongst tech people is very common, and also even at a very young age. So being mindful of the biohacking stuff, blue light blockers, getting to bed at a proper time. Most tech people are late night guys. They get, locked in a problem, and it's 3 to 4 in the morning, and it's kind of like Neo in the Matrix kind of thing. That's really a very real thing. So being mindful of those things so that you can optimize your sleep, because in sleep, this is where you actually defrag your cognitive computer. This is the cleaning part of the system, which allows those receptors to stay shiny, active, and highly functional. Without cleaning the machine, you start to build up gunk in the brain, and this leads to a variety of malaise and poor cognitive decisions, as well as just an overall lack of vim and vigor for life. And so you want to be able to adjust those and set regular marks of monitoring. And this is where neurofeedback comes in, and some of the devices that are available, whether that's sleep monitors, mindfulness machines and things. So I think that there's an opportunity here for tech people to be using these things in correlation to make sure that they're at their carbon-based best.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and thanks for sharing. We'll definitely put the formula, the awesome formula, and all the other things you mentioned in the show notes so that people can get started. And I like this idea of a 12-week program, which is something that in this kind of structured way can be very helpful for a lot of the listeners here. To someone basically walks them through every week. So let's do this, then go into the next one and the next one. But sharing this type of knowledge, and as you said, if you're giving these things even away for free, I mean, this is high value that we definitely I'll share for sure also in my network. Maybe one last question would be around the neurofeedback,
Yes.
because I feel this is one. Myself, I started looking into neurofeedback also many years ago, and I've seen, oh man, there's this huge construction zone in the brain which is completely not optimized at all. And nowadays there is technology, and you can actually go into this and start tuning it using technology. Maybe share just some quick impressions about. You mentioned the 40 years of Zen program, which I'm also very familiar with, but the listeners may not even heard about any of this. So maybe in a very quick, in a nutshell, to share about the feedback on this one.
Excellent. So kudos to, I think, one of the fathers of modern neurofeedback, which is Dr. Hart, who runs a facility in Sedona, Arizona called BioCybernaut. And both Dave and myself were students of him. Basically, he was hooking up. He had built some algorithms that hooked up to your brain and could measure brain responses in the body. And we began going to these week-long courses so that we could improve cognitive function, emotional availability, things like that. And the shifts in perception were great. Basically, It was using a silicon brain to give you feedback on your carbon brain. So how do you watch your brain if you're entering mindfulness? And what Dr. Hart was able to discover is that you could get with this kind of technology, you could advance your meditation by decades in a quarter of a week, because now you have a way of, when you're entering the right states, to be able to monitor that and then course correct. Dave went on and expanded that operations in 40 years of Zen to offer a variety of more expansive choices, particularly related to, I think, digital executives. I'm a regular student. I go every 6 months up to Dave's place and get that, and he's done a great service of that. While we were doing that, though, we also realized that there's a third element to this, and that was not just the practice and not just the feedback, which was increasing the connections, was in the actual production of the neurochemicals that allowed for faster connections or more intense connections, or an expansion of the possibility of connections to different parts of the brain. So we started using a variety of nootropic substances in order to enhance this. And that then led to the development with one of our researchers who we call Mr. Newts, which is a company called Newtopia. The problem that people have with their brains is you have a variance in neurotransmitter dominance. This is determined, you can take a Braverman test and see which neurochemical dominance that you have. Charles Poliquin was a coach of gold medal athletes, 27 different sports. He won gold medals on his students. And he used to test people for neurocognitive biochemical dominance. And if they had certain traits, that would determine how often and how frequently he could train them, because he knew how fast they could recover. So it turns out when it gets into, regular humans, not gold medalists, you have somewhere around 8 dominant factors, and they work in different in combinations. So it's not one single point. And so what we went about doing is developing a host of neurochemical options, nootropics, that would be curated individually for each person's brain, because each person's brain is different. And then further allowing our chemists, through feedback that the person provides, to give them individualized, customized nootropic blends. Because what would happen is, if you're reliant on, say, drugs like Adderall and things like that, you actually end up in neurochemical burnout. What we wanted to do is to organically flood the system with the appropriate neurochemicals that were being used, so that you had a deeper reserve to extend your cognitive capabilities. And that's what we do. So it's really fun.
Oh,
That company's Newtopia. So
oh, this is great. I'll definitely will share some links on this one as well. And I know the for listeners, many of the listeners are here located in Europe. There is actually, from Dr. Hart, they have also a facility here in Bavaria,
yes,
which,
they do.
which is very cool. I read about it as well, and I heard a lot of positive things. And yeah, and the other one at the end of the day is on Dave, is I think located in Canada, right? In
Well, he has two. He has one in Seattle, just
oh,
outside of Seattle, and then I think he's just built a new one over in Vancouver Island. I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
he lives over there, and he's decided to expand his facilities for his own convenience.
Great.
And so good for him. I have yet to go there. I'm hoping to get up there this fall.
Sounds good. No, that's great, and I like the combination of the new tropics along with the training, along with mindfulness training, but or more cutting edge technology like 40 years of Zen. So this is all great stuff. So I think a lot of interesting ideas, a lot of actionable tips here in this interview. Thanks. Wait for all the sharing, all this good stuff. We'll add all those links, as I said. Do you have maybe one last remark before we close off?
Yes, indeed. Um, we are going to see the emergence of a new humanity, whether that's the fusion with machines, whether that is the augmentation of the biology by machines, genetic engineering, neurocognitive enhancement, extensions of it. But at the end of the day, what makes us human is the cascade of the axon dendrite connections, our ability to feed those through, I would say, selective nutritional optimization, and being able to replenish the neurocognitive capabilities of our brains on a level that allows us to continue to expand and meet the demands of an increasing complex or technologically driven world. And so, just like computing power needs to continue to expand, leaders inside the tech world are now becoming clear that they have to upgrade and optimize their carbon-based systems in order to be competitive in a very increasingly expansive world of the digital landscape. And so I'm excited to be there and assisting in that process.
Very good. No, thanks a lot. And yeah, we'll share all those things. Thanks for taking the time, Wade.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.